Hey everyone. It's been one of those mornings today. It's been a busy last couple of weeks. Sorry I wasn't on last week. We had a pretty major storm in our area. Really big, really big. It knocked out power for us for several days. That's the first time I've ever been without power for such a long time. So didn't get so basically just had to stick around home, make sure that they could get the stuff they needed done. I did post one of the pictures of the interesting thing was our neighbor's tree came down and grabbed some of the lines for a different power pole and then yanked our power pole and cut off. It hit it with such force that it broke off the top of the power pole. So I was like, because I thought originally it was lightning, but when the storm had lifted, we were able to see what the tree had done. So that and just work stuff. So as you know, I do this as just for fun and not my 9 to 5. And so my 9 to 5 is gearing up. And so, yeah, it's just been a busy last couple of weeks, but I'm happy to be with you today. Happy to be talking to you about some wonderful box office numbers and some stuff about movies. And I got some great stuff about screenwriting software that I can't wait to share with you all too. Yeah, so let's get kicked off for today. So let's start with, let's see if I get the box office numbers. So today, let's take a look and see, because this was really interesting. I wasn't sure. I knew Beetlejuice was coming out, but I wasn't sure how good it was going to do. I don't think I realized it was going to do this well, and because it did awesome-tacular, as Jeremy Johns would say. It came in with $110 million. Can you believe that at the box office? $110 million. Now, what I want you to sort of look at this in terms of this sort of trend in the box office right now. Look what it's up against, though. So as we look at the next couple top 10 movies, Deadpool and Wolverine, that's been out for 7 weeks. It's already made its bankroll back. Incredibly, it's over. If you take a look at, it's about even in terms of domestic as well as foreign. Now, an interesting thing enough about Beetlejuice actually didn't gross that much foreign or not domestically. Foreign based, it only made about $35 million. So it's still, don't get me wrong, it's still doing great, but it's more of a domestic audience that is looking at Beetlejuice. Reagan hasn't been doing too bad, $18.5 million. Alien Romulus hasn't quite got over that $100 million domestically. It's still not doing bad, but again, we talked about this before. Should have Alien Romulus just stayed on Hulu? I think it probably should have, just because of the amount of marketing that went into it. They probably would have made more money off of streaming than just being in the box office. It ends with Us. I've heard a lot of controversy with the actors and the people associated with this. It's still doing good in terms of a movie, though I can't tell you how the people who made the movie and starred the movie, how they'll end up with being. I'll have to dig into that a little deeper, but it was interesting to hear that on a couple of different shows I watched about the different numbers. The Forge, Twisters, again, 8 weeks, made $264 million. It's sort of like Beetlejuice in the perspective. It's not as well, is not doing as well with foreign audiences as it is with domestically. Blink Twice, I've heard that's a pretty decent movie, but again, it's in its 3rd week out. Despicable Me 4, The Front Room, Inside Out has finally fallen, at least since the last time I looked, outside of the top 10. It's at number 13. Still, I think it's pretty doggone awesome. But The Front Room was the other new movie out this week, and it made a disappointing $1.6 million. We can talk about that in a little bit, about why I think it didn't do so well. But looking at the competition for Beetlejuice, is it any surprise that it did so well? Now, here is another thing that I want to show you really quickly in terms of that. Talking about it's one of the only things out there, but also looking at it from this perspective as well too. If you look at the perspective of what is being released in the theater, so this is the theaters that is near me, and taking a look at their numbers, or just take a look at here. Now watch this real quick. So we take a look at The Front Room, 4 showings. Beetlejuice, 8 showings. So twice the number of the other movie that was released right when it was done. But let's look at the other movies. Reagan's only got 3. Afraid's got 4. The Forge has got 2. My Penguin Friend's got 2. Romulus has got 4. It Ends With Us. Deadpool and Wolverine still only has 4. And Twisters and stuff only has 2. So the interesting thing about this is that so the interesting about this is that it's got a lot of people. It's the movie theaters are pushing this show in some sense. So the box office is a little skewed because there's nothing really new out there. There's no real competition to, and we're going to see this for next week, and we're going to probably see this all the way through October. There's really no competition for Beetlejuice. It's still going to do really good because there's no competition. And I don't know what the studios were thinking. Now, Craven originally was going to be sort of the nemesis to this. But at the end of the day, it got moved to a different release schedule. So there's no real there's nothing else that's in this particular way. There's nothing else in the way of Beetlejuice for doing well. So in some sense, Beetlejuice had the perfect setup. You had it's against Deadpool and Wolverine, but after Deadpool and Wolverine has been out for 7 weeks. And like as we can take a look here, it's got a 53.5% drop. Again, anything over 50% is worrisome for a film, but Deadpool and Wolverine, you made your money back in spades, so I'm not worried about that. Reagan, still doing good. I expect it to do at least $3 million next week because it's only did a drop of 31%. Alien Romulus, 57%. It's probably not going to do more than 1.8 in terms of how it's going to do next week. It's going to get close to that $100 million domestically. We'll have to see. It Ends With Us, still doing good. Still right around that 50% range, so it's not going to drop too much. The Forge, still hanging in there really well. Twisters, I think I'm probably going to bet Twisters is going to drop out of the top 10 next week. Blink Twice, again, probably holding on number 8. Despicable Me, all these films are, if there's anything else that's new, some of these bottom films are going to probably drop out relatively quickly. The Trap, the one thing the M. Night Shyamalan movie I talked about, it was about a $40 million for them to create this movie, and they've got their budget back. Now they have to just make back the marketing, which they should easily do in streaming as well as in video sales. And so I think as much as a lot of people thought The Trap was a bad movie, it was good enough to get its money back. And The Front Room, I don't know. I've heard this is a pretty bad movie. I haven't seen The Front Room yet. And so even though it's out on a lot of theaters, 2,000 theaters, I think it's probably not going to go up much more than the top 10, maybe even drop out of the top 10, depending on, because of word of mouth of how bad it is. So it seems like there's a perfect storm for Beetlejuice to do great because there's nothing in the theater that can really go against it. People want something a little different too, in terms of people are getting sick of horror movies. As we can see, there's a couple of horror movies still around the top 10, but people are sort of getting sick of that. And so the other thing that was interesting too is Beetlejuice is sort of another type of Halloween type of movie, but it's not necessarily a scary movie. And so Grace Randolph had an interesting point in her video about this, was that people really want sort of those holiday movies, like either around Christmas or Halloween, that are just sort of about the holiday. And we don't get a lot of those anymore. We might get a scary movie, but people I think are looking for films to watch on Halloween. What do you normally watch on Halloween, or what do you watch on Thanksgiving, or what do you watch on Christmas? During the Christmas season, I normally watch It's a Wonderful Life. That's a movie I like to watch. And we normally, I'm trying to think of the other one that I normally like to watch around Christmas, like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer or something like that, something that really gets me sort of in the mood for that particular holiday. And to believe it or not, there's not a lot of films out there that do just exactly that. And so it shouldn't be a wonder. I think Beetlejuice is probably going to be next week, maybe taking the $50 million. I see it as a 50% drop. But I don't know. There's just not a lot coming out. And I think that's troublesome. And it's like Hollywood, I think, is really dropping the ball here in terms of that, and that there's not anything else really to. I think Warner Brothers is doing great. And from that perspective, they released this movie now. There's no competition. It's eating up the box office like crazy because people want to watch something, but there's nothing really good to watch. And as writers, unfortunately, we don't always get the say into when films are released and stuff like that. So now would Beetlejuice in a different market do as well? Had it gone head to head with Wolverine and Deadpool, I think it would not have done as well. Or even if it was released the same day, the same weekend as Alien Romulus, would Beetlejuice have done as well as it should have? And that's hard to say. And I think it really depends on what you, how good of the movie do you think it is? So I have some interesting stuff about the particular screenwriters who wrote this. And I think it's always good to post and stuff like that. So let's take a look at some of the screenwriters who brought us Beetlejuice. Now, the funny part was I had just done a video on the first page of Lego Batman, and the guy who wrote Lego Batman was actually one of the writers for Beetlejuice, though he was not the main writer for that. And there was a writing team that did this. Now, I think it's important to always look at the writers because that sort of will show you a little bit more about the particular teams and stuff. So the first one I'm going to look at is Alfred Goh. And he is a partner. Let me just show you the rest of the writer group here real quick. Alfred Goh, Miles Millar, they both are a writing team together. And then Sept, who is the one who wrote, who is one of the people credited with the Lego Batman movie. And I did, like I said, a video recently on him. Now, the interesting thing about Alfred, an interesting thing in terms of writing, let's take a look at this 3 upcoming projects. I'm just curious right now. Shanghai Dawn, Wednesday, and The Machine. So interesting. He did the screenplay characters. So Shanghai Dawn, Shanghai Noon, the one with Jackie Chan. I didn't know he was one of the persons that he's got the character and story by. I don't necessarily know if he's writing it. But so if we take a look at his stuff, you can see that Alfred does a lot of television episodes. So if you're thinking of getting hired as a movie writer, one of the best ways to get into movies is to write a TV show or to be a writer in the writing room, which is why a lot of these shows are very coveted, because you want to come in and get a name for yourself. You need a product for somebody to read and say, oh yeah, you did a good work here, or hey, this is the episode that I wrote and stuff like that. And one of the easiest things to do right now is to get into TV. Now, I would argue the next best thing you could do is sort of create web series for yourself on YouTube and stuff like that. And you might say, well, that's hard to do and stuff like that. And I would argue with that to say that you can create images using AI. There's a lot of AI software coming out where you can animate the images as well too. Is it as great as a TV show? No, but it shows people, if people start making a following from you, from your work and listening to your stories and becoming a fan of your stories, you'll be surprised what happens. So I think that's going to be the sort of next evolution for screenwriting, is that people are going to create their own series. Because right now the writer is king. I wrote a video a little bit a while ago and produced one about how writers are kings. And people are like, yeah, no, that's really not the case. But it is. If you have a good writer and you write a good story, good things happen. You're going to get hired on projects. You're going to be helping with rewrites and stuff like that because you're such a good writer. And people, you just need to get yourself, like I said, good stories will come to the surface because we have so much bad stuff. But you can sort of see some of the stuff that he's created. Shanghai Nights, Spider-Man 2. Again, this is Alfred. Aquaman, the TV movie. A couple Mummies, the video game. Charlie's Angels TV series back in 2011, but he did Smallville. I mean, that was a huge. He did 217 episodes. Believe me, you get really good at writing when you have that many episodes and you have that much stuff in the can, in terms of writing and stuff like that. So I thought that was really neat to sort of find out who he was as a writer, and get to know him a little bit. And I think as we look at all these different movies, take a look at the writing team. And see what kind of, not to say that they have to have a ton of different experience behind writing and stuff like that, but I think it tells. I mean, if you have a seasoned writer, how much better a movie tends to be. Now, the other thing that could throw a wrench in the works is if the studio has an overt amount of influence in the production of that film. And so you could have the best written script in the world, but if you have some studio execs that say, no, we don't really like that, which is why I think independent films need to be seen more often and be supported more often, because it allows us to see there's something outside the studio system. Right now, we're inundated with the studio system, and unfortunately, we're seeing the drawbacks of the studio system. We're seeing how it's not a great type of thing right now. I mean, because if you look at the movies right now, how many movies have you actually been excited for this year? How many movies are you excited for? I remember when Lord of the Rings came out, not the Rings of Power, but the Lord of the Rings came out, how excited I was to know that over the next couple of years, those would come out and I'd get to watch them and just to experience the filmmaking, how much I enjoyed the spectacle of that. Was so cool. And I don't get that vibes now. And I think it's because, and we'll talk about this a little bit more down in the pop culture section. But I think studios have to refigure out how to do stuff. Because right now, and Grace Randolph made a good point, I don't always agree with Grace about stuff. But this I agreed with her about was, people are still seeing sequels and prequels and stuff like that. But at the same time, this is all you're going to get to watch. I mean, I want to go to the movies, and if the only thing I can watch is prequels and sequels, I'm going to end up going to one. And so I don't like her argument. She's like, well, you guys keep going to them. This is why they keep doing that. I'm like, but they don't release any original stuff. If Hollywood would release original material and it's done well, people would flock to it, and you don't need an IP for that. But I don't like Grace's argument. She's like, well, you guys are seeing it, so this is why they're going to continue to do this. And this is the reason why we're going to have Beetlejuice 3, is because of how well Beetlejuice 2 is doing. It demands a sequel. So yeah. The other article I wanted to bring up in terms of Beetlejuice for this week is this article I found, let's see, in Variety. So this is interesting too. They talk sort of about Alfred and about different parts about the movie. And the interesting thing that I haven't got to see Beetlejuice yet, but the interesting thing that they wanted to really, the one thing they really wanted to honor the original movie about was that in Beetlejuice, in the original movie, Keaton only appears for 17 minutes in the movie, and they didn't want that to be much different in this one. And I think if I remember right, Keaton is only in about 20 minutes of this film, and so I think that's a good amount. I mean, you don't overuse Beetlejuice at all, which I think is good, or Michael Keaton's character. And I know if I've been saying Beetlejuice enough times that Beetlejuice should have showed up like many, many times by now. So it also was an interesting decision that they decided to not bring in the original Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin characters, and that they sort of made it really about Winona Ryder's character. Am I seeing that right? I think I am. Let's see. So yeah, Winona Ryder's character. And they wanted a sort of a tale between Lydia and Astrid, and sort of having the two talk to each other and figuring stuff out. So the first movie says something about the culture of the time. Yuppies moved to the country. It's like a gentrification movie in many ways. But so they wanted to modernize the smarminess as their character. Rory aptly weaponizes therapy, speak to take advantage of those around him. So it's been really much updated. So we can sort of see their thoughts again, this from this Vanity article that I have linked. You can take a look and sort of see what sort of their mindset was behind when they were creating this sequel to to Beetlejuice. And I think it's interesting as a writer, as we look at these things, to go, okay, so how do we incorporate the stuff from the old, but yet make this our own story? Something that Rings of Power has not yet figured out yet. How do we honor the source material, but yet have a new direction? We'll get to that in pop culture. But I think Beetlejuice, on the whole, did a good job of sort of honoring the original material and yet striking out in a new direction. All right, so that's our box office numbers for this week. So let's take a look at upcoming movies. We did show some of those. Let me grab that. I have to grab a new. Give me a second here. All right. So if we look at the movies that are coming out, this week here. Let's see here. Okay. All right. So let me share my screen with you guys. So upcoming movies this week. At least at my theater. So we have Am I a Racist? Okay. I haven't heard of that one yet. I'd have to probably look at that. So let's see. It's from a white guy who brought you What is a Woman? Comes Am I a Racist? So is it a Matt? Oh, it's a Matt Walsh movie. Okay. So that's interesting that they're going to be doing that. Also, God's Not Dead and God We Trust. The Killer Game. And does that got Ballista in it? On the top. Yeah, I think it's got Speak No Evil. So there's really not anything that's really that exciting that's coming out this particular week that I see that's really going to dethrone Beetlejuice at all. I mean, I think it'll take away a little bit because some of these have some novelty factors to them. But on the whole, I don't think Beetlejuice is going to have any problems rolling in another $50 million to $60 million dollar weekend, especially with it was rated a B+, which is better than the original Beetlejuice. So I think, like I said, I think that's sort of we're going to see in the theater. I don't think the new movie with Speak No Evil, I don't think is going to really do anything. I mean, that's the next horror movie, and I think that sort of talks about a little bit more about how much we're not really interested in horror movies anymore. Well, I should say we had a lot of good horror. We have a good run of horror movies, but I think the hard part of that is horror movies are easy to make, and people can spend like $20 million and hardly anything on budgeting, or I should say anything on marketing, and make their money back really quickly. And so you have a lot of places like A24, Blumhouse, that type of stuff, whose bread and butter is just making horror movies, which is fine, but people get a little sick of them. We're going to see more. We'll be more inundated with them as we get closer to Halloween and stuff like that. So it's interesting. That's sort of what we're seeing right now. But again, there's no big threat for Beetlejuice next week. So I'm really thinking about $50 to $60 million. So I always find it interesting to see what the price or how much they make the next week. So I think that'll be interesting for us to take a look at. So, all right, let me take a look at my notes. So let's head over to pop culture. We have a bunch of different things to talk about pop culture wise today. I thought we'd be done talking about The Acolyte, to be honest with you, but it doesn't seem like we are. It seems to keep bringing its ugly head back up time and time again, and I don't know why. It's not that good of a film, but there's just so much angst around it, and I oops, I think did I pick the wrong one? Nope, I picked the right one. Okay. But there's so much angst around it, which I don't understand. I don't understand why there's so much angst about it. Was a bad TV show. It's okay. It happens. They made a mistake. They spent $180 million, which they shouldn't have. So they some of the things I thought that were interesting. So it says, unfortunately, Lucasfilm will not be moving forward with The Acolyte Season 2. The cancellation, though not quite unexpected because that the numbers weren't good, is still a blow for the Star Wars that dampens hopes for the franchise's future. It depends on that particular statement. As I look at that statement, I'm like, okay, maybe. But at the same time, I'm like, if this helps them do a course correction, they start producing shows that people want to watch, then was this bad for the franchise? No, it was a mistake for the franchise. But if they learn something from it, I mean, that's the big thing. And can they learn something from it? Which is, it's going to be hard. Is the folks from Star Wars going to learn about that? So, let's see. And the author is talking again. This is from the LA Times, who they really enjoyed this particular show. I don't know why, because I thought the cast didn't do a really good job, except for Manny. Manny was probably the best actor in there, followed by Soul, the guy who played Soul. Those were pretty good actors, but the rest of them were pretty bad. And for $180 million, the show did not look like it was well done. Plus, we know that Leslie Headland had a lot of. I think the other thing that really rocked this particular show was not good, because Star Wars is based on good versus evil. Now you have this sense of moral relativism, and that is not a good thing. When in terms of a show that's based on good versus evil, and now you're saying everybody's good, everybody's evil. It just depends, what side you're on. And I'm like, no, there's a difference between being for the Sith and being for the Jedi. So one of the interesting parts that when I was reading through her article, it seems in some ways it felt the Acolyte was doomed from the start. There has long been a dark side to the Star Wars fandom that is vocal in its vitriol towards perceived shortcomings, just as how the Phantom Menace was received when it first premiered. And I don't know what she is talking about from this, because I remember being at the Phantom Menace so we were up in North Dakota at the time, and that theater was packed with people. We were excited to see it. So the fun part was, we got there like 2 hours early. We had people playing chess. We had people singing. It was a great time. We had a great time. And when the movie came on, halfway through the movie, they put I don't know how they put the wrong reel on or something like that. But so we had like half the theater go out, hey, they're re-showing the first part of the movie. So we got that fixed and stuff like that. But I don't remember when we came out of the theater that a lot of people were like, oh, this is horrible. I mean, later on, I went to go back to see it about 4 to 5 to 6 times. And was it as good as what I would like? No. Did it have some plot holes? Yeah. But it's still, people still accepted it. I don't remember the vitriol as much coming, and maybe it's because there wasn't YouTube at the time, or a YouTube reviews like we had before. But I don't recall that. I don't remember there being, I remember people saying they don't like it as much, but it was okay. I mean, it wasn't as good as what we were hoping for, but it wasn't that bad. So I don't agree with her when she sort of says, well, the Phantom Menace and the Acolyte, in some sense, she's trying to put them on equal footing because, well, George Lucas's product, the Phantom Menace, didn't do as well, and the Acolyte didn't do as well. So she's sort of like trying to draw similarities between the two, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. Since then, Star Wars has become sort of a battleground in the culture wars where self-proclaimed superfans feel emboldened to make racist and sexist remarks viewed as criticism. At times, their campaigns against certain Star Wars installments begin even before the trailer's release. So, a series like The Acolyte, created by a woman and starring actors of color, was already facing an uphill battle in certain online spaces. I don't agree with this section at all either. Because people of color have always been a part of Star Wars. And if you look at The Empire Strikes Back, Lando Calrissian, Billy D. Williams, who played Lando Calrissian, he was African-American. You had women. Princess Leia was a strong female character, not a Mary Sue, like what we see nowadays, but a strong female character. And people didn't mind that at all. So I think the hard part is, I think a lot of these people these creatives, when they get criticized for how they're creating stuff, how they're doing stuff, is they are not able to take the criticism. And so what they do, they pan it off as, well, it's being racist. It's being, it's they don't have a good comeback to why, the show is doing badly. They just pawn it off to being, because I don't hear a lot of I don't hear a lot of retorts from Leslie Headland saying, hey, but this part of the script was really good. Because there's not a lot of good comebacks to, okay, you wrote this way. This is why this is problematic. This is why it's not good storytelling. You tell us one thing and then you do a lot of, well, well, it could mean this or it could mean that. And it's like, well, what do you mean by this? What are you trying to get across by this? And I think that's the problem that a lot of people are having, is that they're not really defending the decisions that they're making. I mean, the story writing is just horrible. Now, when we critique the story writing, why is that often perceived as racist and sexist? It's not because Leslie's a woman that I don't like the story. Carrie Fisher wrote a lot. She was a screenwriter as well, too. I like the stuff that she wrote. She was a woman. And so why can't, and I think it goes back to, what can she do to be a better writer? And why is Disney entrusting somebody who has so little screenwriting credits to such a big budget? Why didn't they make an $80 million movie, or maybe a $40 million TV series? I think, to me, with the visuals and the acting and the stuff like that, why couldn't you have made a $40 million TV series and let her try that? And if it doesn't work, okay, you lose $40 million as opposed to $180 million, which is just ridiculous. I think that they really need to think about. I think they really need to think about, in terms of, when we criticize stuff, we want it to be better. We want the people to improve their craft. People criticize me for videos I make or my writing and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, so how do I get better? How do I do things better? Like now I'm using StreamYard to help do my streaming versus other stuff. Or I'm using different setups. I have a different camera or a different microphone, or I need a different chair because this one creaks all the time. But how do you get better at doing stuff? And I don't see people taking the criticism to heart and saying, okay, we could do better. This is what we can do. They just turn it around and go like, nope, you guys are awful. You're just bad. And because you're bad, we're not going to listen to you. And it's like, but there's valid criticism in what they're saying. You need to do something about that. And I think until Disney does that, until Star Wars does that, I don't think you're going to see a lot of people flocking to their movies, because, to be honest, right now, I'm not excited to see any Star Wars product, because I don't think the writing is going to be up to snuff. Now, if it's Andor, I'm going to probably go and see that, because I know who the writing team is for that. And they're actually some pretty good writers. But if it's an unknown Star Wars product, until I've had other people watch it and other people tell me that's it's good, I'm probably not going to want to write, to look at it, or to view it at all. So, okay. So speaking of bad writing, we can talk about our next fun topic. And it's interesting. It's coming from these big companies too. So we have Star Wars that was bought by Disney, and now we have the next one, which is the Rings of Power. So, what can we say about our fabulous Rings of Power? So this is from Forbes. There's like two different authors from Forbes, and this is the one that I particularly seem to resonate the better with. And he starts off by saying, I have somehow made it through the first 3 episodes of the Rings of Power season 2 on Prime Video, though the show's sophomore effort did not make this either pleasant or easy on me. The trappings of a decent epic fantasy are here. It looks good, except for when it looks like a movie set, and sounds very nice. But that's about it. Season 2, if anything, is worse than season 1, or at least messier. Sure, it picks up the action a bit, but somehow the soulless season 1 feels downright poignant compared to whatever the second season brings to the table. I'm astonished both by its lack of coherent storytelling and its utter absence of anything like heart. No matter how many times the characters say very deep things to one another as music swells dramatically and loudly to instruct us how to feel. The creators of the show, Patrick McKay and J.D. Payne, took Tolkien's work and made their own world out of it, borrowing little bits and pieces in order to market it to a wider audience. They have given us a sprawling Middle-earth made up of a patchwork of Tolkien-esque pieces, a clumsy but grand Frankenstein monster of a show. What they've forgotten to do is to give us a reason to care. And I think this sort of sums up a lot of what we're sort of seeing in a lot of these sequels and prequels and whatever you else you want to call them right now, is the fact that there's no heart. There's no heart in these shows. There's no reason to care. Why do we identify with characters? What is their character arc? And it'd be interesting to see as we go through, well, let's even if we backtrack to the Acolyte a little bit, what is Osha's arc? What is the arc? What are the different ways that we see the arc build up? And I think you see the same things in Rings of Power. What is the arc? And the other thing too with Rings of Power is, okay, here's the characters and this is how they should be acting, and now they're acting really different, or they're acting really dumb. I think a lot of the reason why we lose our suspension of disbelief, because we know that elves don't exist and that type of stuff, but we lose our suspension of disbelief because of what they're going through isn't really working well. It's not doing a good job. It's it's not doing good at all. It's not making a compelling story. It's not getting us invested in the characters. And I think the most important thing is if you can get people to get invested in your characters, if they begin to see themselves in the characters. And I also think it's very shallow when they have to say, well, the character has to look like me for me to be invested in the character. And I'm like, no, that is, that's not a good way to look at it too. Why can't you put yourself in somebody's shoes who don't look like you? I mean, if we have to have somebody look like us and for us to be attached to a character, I mean, if I watch Aladdin, and does that mean I have to be somebody who is a thief? At the beginning of the movie, he's a thief, or do I have to be a prince in order to appreciate Aladdin? Or if I like Yoda, he doesn't look like me. I'm not a little green. I don't have sparse white hair and stuff like that, but I like the character of Yoda because he reminds me of a lot of good characteristics of people that I like. Or he's this wise person that I would like to strive to be. And so I think that's where these shows fall short, is you're not giving us believable characters. They're not running through arcs that are working. And I don't know when suddenly that in a sea of good shows, because there's a lot of good shows out there, there's a lot of bad shows. Rings of Power would be a bad show, but in a sea of good shows where there's arcs, where people are doing things that are interesting and exciting, why are we allowing? Why are we even? And you can see people aren't giving their eyeballs to this because there's a lot better stuff to watch. Probably the people who are watching the Rings of Power the most, as well as the Acolyte, were people who were making content off of it so they could, make a living off of it because it was that bad. People didn't want to watch it, not because they're racist or sexist, but it was a bad story. And until these people who are the writers and show writers understand that they need to write to an audience and have that audience want to follow along with them, and not the other way around and say, hey, it's Rings of Power, or hey, it's Star Wars, you need to follow us. That's not working anymore. And so they need to stop that. I mean, it's just gotten so bad right now. So the other article I wanted to show you, which I thought was a funny one, going back to Rings of Power, and again, going back to Forbes, that the only thing good out of the Rings of Power season 2 is there's a guy on YouTube who does these comedy bits, and it's Charlie Hopkinson. So take a look at this guy's videos. He does Gandalf roasts videos about season 1, and he's doing some good stuff in season 2. So this is the only reason this is the only thing that's really good coming out of season 2 of the Rings of Powers, is the parodies, is all the stuff that we're seeing on YouTube about these folks talking about how bad a movie is. And I think the other thing too is you have to realize, people are not just saying this is bad, and they're giving you explanations. They're telling you why the story's bad, why it doesn't make sense, why it doesn't work. And so I think, does it make it harder for us as writers? Yes, it does make it hard for writers because we have to think through stuff. We have to understand the logic of what we're doing, why the characters are doing stuff. In some sense, it makes it better characters for us because they're not just doing stupid stuff. They're doing character stuff that makes sense. And so I think that's, as a writer, what we need to do is to make sure that our characters make sense. Some great tools you can use for that. If you haven't tried Script Studio yet, they have a long sort of list to help you sort of figure out who your character is. Not Arc Studio Pro, but Story Architect is another one where it has a long list of questions. So you can really dial in on your characters and figure out who they are and stuff like that. Same with Pre-Write. I like Pre-Write as well too. So those are some good tools for you to try if you really want to sort of craft your characters in better type of ways. Let's see here. So next, let's talk about screenwriting tips. So screenwriting tips. The one I want to talk about is there was a nice one in screenwriting. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at Screenwriting Magazine or Script Magazine, take a look at that. They have some great resources, some great articles. I always enjoy sharing these articles with you all with stuff. And so this one is called Show But Don't Tell. And so what it's getting at is how do we show our character? So we just got done talking to have this discussion about, let me make sure I got the right. Yep. So we just got this great discussion talking about how to make better characters. And in this particular case, so they were thinking, well, how do we do this? And so this is from the script, The Big Lebowski. And this is how we are introduced to one of the iconic characters, the dude. So it's late, the supermarket all but deserted. We are tracking in on a 40-ish man in Bermuda shorts and sunglasses at the dairy case. He is the dude. His rumpled look and relaxed manner suggest a man whom casualness runs deep. He feels quarts of milk for coldness and examines their expiration dates. So we begin to, when we sort of allow us to show what he looks like, as opposed to just telling what he looks like. So we're understanding who he is. You know, we're not worried that his Bermuda shorts were blue or his sunglasses were a particular style, unless that was really telling us about the character. But it really helps us to see who the character is. We get to see the surroundings they're in and stuff like that. We get to know the character in their native habitat. Another great one too comes from the Silence of the Lamb script, where we go down to Dr. Lecter's cell. It is coming slowly into view. Behind its barred front wall is a second barrier of stout nylon net, sparse bolted down furniture, many soft-colored books and papers. On the walls, extraordinarily detailed, skillful drawings, mostly European cityscapes in charcoal or crayon. And Dr. Hannibal Lecter is lounging on his bunk in white pajamas, reading an Italian Vogue. He turns, considers her, a face so long out of the sun it seems almost bleached, except for the glittering eyes and the wet red mouth. He rises smoothly, crossing to the stand before her, the gracious host. His voice is cultured and soft. So you get some very, like the article saying, there's some very powerful visuals here, not to mention world building for introducing a formidable character who is charming as he is lethal. I think that's the important thing, is how are we describing our characters? Are we just describing their characters to describe them, or are we showing the audience who the character really is? And I'll link that article in the description below as well. So I want you to really think about how you're creating your characters. Are you just showing who your characters are, or are you creating sort of a sense of who they are? You know, think of that Hannibal Lecter thing. You know he's a villain and stuff like that. How do we show that? How do we get people to sort of feel our characters, not just, oh, okay, he's the bad guy, but how do we give them personality? How do we give them panache, that type of stuff. So I really want you to take a look at that article, read through it, and tell me how you're going to make your characters more believable, and how do you show who your character is, as opposed to just telling who your character is. Our next category is screenwriting software. I got some exciting stuff coming up for you. Next week, I think I'm going to do an interview with Studio Vidity's president. I was just talking to him today. If you haven't checked Studio Vidity out, I would definitely give it a try, especially if you're a Studio Binder fan. Studio Vidity is grossly underpriced. It costs a couple bucks a month if you're a screenwriter. But the nice thing about Studio Vidity is it has writing, directing, and sort of the budget. So you can sort of, so if you're, as we talk about becoming that sort of one-stop shop for filmmaking, Studio Vidity is that, because you can write the script and then plot out all the shots and then have a budget all in one app, and it costs 10 times less than Studio Binder. It's not costing you thousands of dollars a month. Probably, I think that they think they're good. Right now, you can buy it for like less than $200 a year for all of that, and it's as good, if not better, than Studio Binder. And I think they put a lot of work into it. So if you haven't had a chance yet, take a look at that. I'm also going to look at Drama Queen, this week someone was suggesting I take a look at Drama Queen, so I'm going to take a look at that and see how Drama Queen looks. So we'll take a gander at that and see how Drama Queen works. I got So Create, an update for them. I've been trying to get talking to them, but it just hasn't worked out yet. So we'll have an update for So Create in terms of software. I think those are all the big updates for screenwriting software. Now for some YouTube BS. And I know probably no one's going to watch this particular part of the video, but excuse me. I was really disappointed with YouTube, or I should say with Warner Brothers. So I made this video for one of my subscribers for his birthday. He wanted the first page of Lego Batman because I do these first page videos and stuff like that. So I did this particular video, and what I was sort of shocked at was I got copyright claimed for. So it's about, they say about 20 seconds worth of footage is really less than that. They actually copyrighted some of my footage with me talking about the film and stuff like that. And they put that in there and say, oh yeah, that's part of us copyrighting. And I'm like, no, it's not. I think Warner Brothers is a little too aggressive in their copyright strikes. It wasn't a strike. They're copyright stuff. And I'm sick and tired. And I see this with the bigger channels as well too. They deal with the same stuff, but they abuse the copyright strike system, and I think they need to be held accountable for that. I think, especially when they're taking your footage and they're saying that's part of the copyright strike, and I'm like, no. I mean, I had like some of their footage, then I had like 10 to 15 seconds of me talking, and then I had a little bit more of their footage, and they still copied. Oh yeah, that's part of. I'm like, no, it's not. There's no dialogue in that from your stuff. That's just me talking. It's me on camera, and that you are claiming that. And so YouTube, you really need to fix that. I mean, it's deplorable that you have these big companies that, and like I said, mine's an educational video. I'm showing you the first scene, and I don't even show you the whole first scene. I break it up into different pieces so that people can see how it fits with the script. It's an educational video. It's clearly Creative Commons. It's by the definition of Creative Commons, and to get copyright strike for that, I think is just deplorable. I wish we could hold some of these copyright companies to account for that, because, I'm going to leave it up there because I don't make any money off AdSense and stuff like that. And yeah, so I'm not worried about that, but that still just makes me really angry that they still do that. I mean, it's just, I don't understand how YouTube gives all the power to these big corporations, and yet when we're using the system as it's intended to be, that we get no protection at all. And if I would file an even bigger claim and say, hey, they really screwed up, I can get a copyright strike against my channel and eventually lose my channel because of some arbitrary, I wish there was something to say, okay, use 12 seconds of footage, that's fine. But I'm using less than 15 seconds of footage for each of these individual clips that I'm using. I'm not using that much of the clip. And to get copyright striked on that, like I said, I'm just done with that. I think Warner Brothers, you need to look at yourself in the mirror, especially when you're looking at an educational video like this, where someone's actually promoting your movie, and you hit me with a copyright strike. I mean, I think it's bad enough that you copyright strike people that don't like your products and stuff like that. But I think it's even worse when you talk about people who are talking about your stuff in a manner that people, hey, I want to know a little bit more about the Lego movie, Batman movie. Can you tell me more? So, all right, I'm done with that. But yeah, I wasn't happy, which is all right. Now for channel updates, got a lot of videos to make. Had some really good questions. I want to do one that I'm still working on, is do a comparison between Save the Cat and Kill the Dog. Someone brought that up, and I really want to try to get that video out. I don't know if I'm going to get it out this week or not. I have a bunch of them on a couple updates for softwares, how to change languages in Final Draft, as well as how to change different parts in Studio Architect in order to get the script bigger and smaller and stuff like that. So I will be doing that as well. And a bunch of other videos. So hopefully we'll have a bunch of videos for me this week. We'll see how things go. But if there's, and like I said, hopefully have Drama Queen review for that. And I might just do that as a live stream so you can sort of see how it looks as we go through it and walk through it and stuff like that. So I might do that as well too. Well, thank you all for coming along, and we had a lot to talk about today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you're all doing well. I hope your writing is doing well. If you have any questions for me, leave them in the comment section below. Until the next video, you know what? Live well and write well. Keep writing, guys. You're doing great. So I'll see you next week.